Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. As we've said, my name is Jonathan Ogg. I work for TXT eSolutions, and in this short presentation I'm just going to briefly tell you who TXT are, what we do, and I'm going to focus and tell you about one of our customers, one of our largest customers, and a project that we have going on there, and tell you some of the learnings from that. It was interesting already, the comments data have come out, and I think that was one of the key learnings of this project. After I've done that, I'm going to hand over to Alain, and Alain's going to talk to you about some of the aspects of people and change management in this type of project. So, TXT, as you can see on the slide, integrated and collaborative planning solutions. What does that mean? It means we're a software vendor in a nutshell, but we focus on supply chain planning and supply chain planning only. And by that I mean demand planning, I mean supply planning in terms of master production scheduling, in terms of distribution planning, inventory planning, procurement planning, and as well production scheduling, so right down at the detailed level, and the capture of that production and the execution and the tracking of the production. We do that as well over varying time horizons, so we do longer term strategic planning, we'll do integrated business planning where we're financializing all of the plans, S&OP, but as well the day-to-day planning in the organization as well. So for instance, forecasting at a daily level for our fresh food customers, down to the production schedule, which is down on the line by the hour and by the minute. So that full aspect of scheduling now. One key thing. So that's TXT briefly. Now, we operate in a number of areas. One of our key areas of operation is within the consumer packaged goods area, and we particularly specialize in food manufacturers. And one of our major customers is the Greencore Group. Now, Greencore, they manufacture own label foods, so as a brand, they're probably not well known outside this room, possibly, but most people in the UK have at some time probably eaten something that's been made by Greencore, even if they don't realise it. The last set of numbers we had from them were about 1.2 billion turnover, so they're a large organisation. They operate predominantly in the UK and Ireland, but also as well they're growing very much in the United States. So they're a business that are constantly changing and constantly growing. So they're a little bit different from some of our other food customers as well, in that they operate in multiple categories, and this brings different challenges. And this is the current list of the categories that they operate in. So food to go, they're a very large sandwich maker, so you've had an M&S sandwich, you'll have had a Greencore sandwich, prepared meals, grocery food, frozen foods, cakes and desserts at the bottom. You can see they've got a UK site in Hull. Fascinating statistic, or at least I find it fascinating, is they make around about 4 million Christmas cakes every year. So you can see they're a very broad business in terms of what they do. Now, as a result of that, in terms of the customers as well, they supply all of the usual major retailers in the usual ways that you would expect within the food industry, but also they go down to what they call a man in a van level as well. So they have, funnily enough, a man who has a van, and he goes out every day and he delivers to fuel stations, convenience stores. So from large-scale distribution to very small customers. So when we first met them a few years ago, this was the layout of the categories, and you can see along the bottom all of the different manufacturing facilities, and if you follow the vertical lines you can follow the kind of supply chain processes in each of these areas, and they were operating very independently. They had 3 different ERP systems within the business and a whole multitude of planning systems. So they had Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Access, they still had some Lotus 1, 2, 3, some other disparate systems, and everybody worked differently and had their own way of doing things. And what they wanted to do was, across the business, have one system for supply chain planning, so end-to-end, from demand to planning all the way down to production scheduling. And they wanted one set of processes that everybody operated to, and one set of common KPIs across the business so they could effectively measure what was going on in that business. And they selected TXT to help them in that. And because of the type of business they are, so many categories, they brought multiple challenges. So if you take at one end of the extreme, if you look at the grocery business on the far right, doing things like packing pickles. You've got a very long shelf life product, a process that's very capital intensive, and they're very much looking to optimize the usage of the labor, the machinery, drive down setup times, drive up yield, but balance inventory across all of that. Whereas at the other extreme in the food to go business, you've got business making to order, making sandwiches, receiving orders through the night from the retailers, delivering same day, no shelf life because who buys yesterday's sandwiches? And then somewhere in the middle, the prepared meals division, again, very short shelf life, but this time sophisticated manufacturing process, multiple levels in the bills of materials, up to 16 levels in the BOM, but then trying to synchronize all of the operations there towards the final filling processes and the preparation of the final meal. So they wanted one size fits all, but one size fitting all meant a very, very broad requirement across the business. So we started the project with them and we applied the TXT software, demand planning, supply, production scheduling. All sites were to have forecasting. They wanted to forecast looking 2 years into the future. They wanted to drive up forecast accuracy within the business. But equally as well, they needed to manage all of the promotional activity and all of these spikes and troughs in demand that were driven by that. All sites other than the food to go would have supply planning, and everyone other than the grocery and water would have production scheduling, really to optimize the production and drive through the service levels that the food business requires. So started the project, we had a template from the first site, and that template was carried forward to other sites. And of course, as in all projects and all businesses, things change. Greencore reorganized themselves, they made some acquisitions, they had to integrate those acquisitions into the business, and had to reorganize the categories as well. So they reduced the number of categories and brought a number of sites together as well to improve the operations of the business. And again, as the project went on, not just the structure and the landscape of Greencore changed, but also the design that we were delivering to them changed. It became very apparent very quickly that, particularly in the prepared meals area on the left here, there was an opportunity to have a category plan in terms of the demand plan and the supply plan. Because what they wanted to do was they wanted to balance the load effectively across the businesses. The 4 different sites there, but the same product could be made on multiple sites. So sometimes a site could be overloaded, another could be short of work. This gives them the opportunity to, in advance, balance and make the best use of the production facilities and make the right products at the right prices. So that was the landscape of Greencore. That's the project. There's an awful lot more to say, very short space of time here. But if we think back on this as a whole, what we've got is they had 3 different ERP systems with Greencore, multi-category business, lots of different requirements on each particular site, and they wanted a one size that fits all with each category. Now then, in that project as well, there were various challenges at the individual sites as well. We had to meet all of the shelf life requirements, all of the optimization requirements, and we were able to do this. Now, within a project like this as well, of course, I've talked about there was lots of change going on. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Alan, and Alan's going to talk to you a little bit about change management and the people aspects in this type of project.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you for inviting us to come along to complement your session as well. We're working with TXT, alongside TXT at Greencore, but I want to give you a few thoughts. I want to share some rabbits with you, basically, today. I've got 3 rabbits for you to take away, which are basically some ideas. And whilst the whole conference is about data and making the industry more efficient through data, I've just entitled my session, And People. You know, about the people side. Now, I've got my colleague Hazel over here, which Hazel will be hovering around as well, just to reward some of you, because I've got a few quizzes and questions for you. Our very first one, just to get us going, George Bernashaw as well. Thank you very much, Dennis. And I'm going to bounce off what you said earlier. Now, George Bernashaw said the single biggest problem with communication is the what that it has taken place. Any thoughts? The leaf. Yes, indeed. Yeah, over here. Yeah. Now, well, we've got the illusion. The illusion that the people just imagine that because they've made a presentation, just because you've kind of explained the project to your people back in the teams, that they understand everything about it. And the 3 rabbits I want to share with you are basically to help you and help your people adopt some of the tools, some of the ideas you're going to be picking out over this summit as well. Because the reality is just making a presentation, just showing some PowerPoint doesn't mean people will happily adopt, obviously, the changes you're trying to make. So first idea, tell me, what is to you mass exposure, mass communication? Give me examples of mass communication that you've used in projects. Give me just examples. Sorry? CCing everybody, very good, okay. So little toys being handed out now by my colleague Hazel. CCing everybody, which is a good example of George Bernard Shaw's explanation. Just because we've copied somebody, just because we've sent them a file, we imagine they've therefore understood what we want them to understand. Very good. What else? What other mass exposure would you use in projects? Intranet, yes, very good. So you're posting things, posting updates on the intranet, and you therefore assume everybody, again, is up to date and reads it. Now, you see, one of the issue is actually, this is all about mass exposure. This is one way, this is you sending updates, and at the other end, you have no idea if people look at it, if they read it, and if they understand it. Now, maybe you've come across something, and as we certainly all use the term, the tipping point. It's a very down-to-earth methodology about change. But the rabbit, the idea I want to leave you with on this one, is that don't just use mass exposure, mass communication, making big presentations, intranets, CCing people. Actually, there's a few very practical things that are much more efficient. And one of the ways you can do that is one-to-ones. Now, you're probably thinking, well, hang on, that's very basic. Of course we sit down and talk with people. Let me give you an example we had a while back. It was a UK retailer putting into place a forecasting tool. And, of course, they had done presentations, and they had got everybody together to explain what the tool was, what the purpose was. And one of the ladies, who was a planner, actually, had been identified in the background as somebody who was resisting the project. She just wasn't on board. And all the company kept doing was more mass exposure. Now, when we actually sat down with that lady and a good old-fashioned chat, okay, it turned out that the perception, the lady said to me, well, I've never been to university, I don't understand all these algorithms in the software, I'm really scared about the whole thing because I just don't understand what's going on in the software. So, by the time I've explained to her that at the end of the day, she didn't need to understand the algorithms. The reason why the company bought and paid for this piece of software was to do all the clever bit and all the mathematical bit, and she needed to carry on what she was doing really well already, which was developing the relationship with the suppliers and so on. Now, all that came out in a very simple, one-to-one, good old-fashioned conversation. And I just want to plant that idea with you again today because you'll hear lots of good solutions over this summit. But sometimes just making big presentation to colleagues doesn't achieve that. Now, there's other things like reward and recognition, and Hazel handing out the odd toy around the room is part of that as well. Obviously, walking the walk, we all know those. There's another one I'd like just to point you at as well. Using advocates. When you've got people in your team, in your business, who are on board, who agree with a project, who know where it's going, use them to communicate as well. And again, a little example, we've been working with John West, part of the MW Brands Group, part of Thai Union, and we've been doing IBP, Sales and Operations Planning, and so on. And of course, you had the whole project team doing mass communication, sending out information. And at some stage, I suggested that the FD sends out a little article in their team to actually get people to read a little article about sales and operations planning, and then to kind of just discuss it with people in the corridors, in the canteen, and so on. And it was very odd, because they would say, why would we want the FD to send something out? He's not even part of the project. But again, we knew he was an advocate. Using advocates to actually promote that is something very simple you can do. Anyway, that was rabbit number 1. Don't just use mass exposure. Rabbit number 2. Don't just use logic. Now, hands up in the room. Put your hands up who likes to use flowcharts and process charts when we try and present a complicated idea. Put your hand up. Yeah, so we've got about 40% in the room or so. Usually flowcharts, process charts are very good at kind of trying to simplify, follow a certain logic to explain a complex idea. The problem is, you're trying to get human beings to adopt things. We are not just logical beings. We are emotional beings as well. Now your tool will be very logical, and therefore explaining the tool through logic is a perfect, a perfect complement. But human beings are much more complex than that. So flowcharts, process charts are good. Use them, but also use emotions. Now, this may sound a little bit fluffy, but one of the simple ways to get a message across and get your people to adopt some of the ideas you'll hear today is actually by telling them stories. We're all children. We all like stories. Again, I've got a very practical example for you here. Cargill, another big, obviously, food giant. We've been working with them in South America and in Europe as well. And I had a group of planners who were new in the role. They were being given a new planning tool, and they had been presented lots of these, just to kind of understand what their new role is and what the process is they're going to have to follow. And yet they still struggle to know what they've got to do on a daily basis. So what we did, we created this month in the life of a planner. And it was a story. This is month in the life of your new job. This is what's going to happen, and you're going to have to speak to so and such person, and you're going to have this frustration, and then you'll be asking for that data, and you'll get it late. And we had a real story, real life little story here. And all of a sudden, people saying, okay, now I understand what my new role is. So again, this is just a little rabbit I'd like you to take away. Don't just use logic when you're trying to explain complex ideas and you want people to get on board your projects. Use the emotional side. Use very simple storytelling because it works. Last rabbit, I'm going to talk about paint because that's the easiest way to remember this one. Tell me, what happens when you are repainting a wall in the house and you put one nice thick coat on it? What happens there? Takes time to dry, very good. Yes, what else?
It runs.
It runs, it gets a bit messy. Yes, indeed. Anything else? Is it going to be all nicely covered? You get patchy, exactly. So, and yet, in projects, we often have a nice big kick-off, a nice big presentation, again, that we've polished and present, and we dump a load of information onto our people, onto our teams, expecting them, A, to absorb all that information. As per your point, it takes time to dry. They won't be able to take everything away in one go. B, you expect them to come away and go, oh yeah, that's a great project, I understand everything about it, and of course I'm going to give up my old ways of working and happily move on from there. It doesn't happen like that. We are complex beings. So the things to remember with paint is that actually it's better to do little but often. You want nice thin coats, you want to let it dry, and another thin coat, and that's the way you want to be communicating with people when you need them to adopt change. When we do our big presentations, anybody know what percentage retention do you get from colleagues and project teams? What percentage do you think do they remember, after a few weeks from what you've presented? 1%. Oh, well, I'm glad you're being honest. Thank you very much. Hazel, well, there's one at the front here as well. Gentlemen. Anybody else? 12, you're right. Yes, it's usually between 5 and 10%. You're absolutely right. So a lady over there shouted 12. Oh, there we go. Hand up. There we go. Now, please remember that when you start to add more and more and more slides to your presentation. Say, oh, I need to tell them about this. I need to tell them about that. The more you put in, the less they'll take back. So it's much better to again, do small sessions more often and let it sink in. So the 3 rabbits were, anybody remembers? Yeah, don't just use logic. Make sure you tell stories as well. Don't just use mass exposure. Absolutely, use one-to-ones, use advocates, a bit of a snowball effect. And obviously this one here, when you communicate, you want people to get on board. Little but often, much more manageable indeed. Now I'll finish, and in case you're wondering who am I to tell you about all this. So as a company, we call Human Consulting. What we do is basically we specialise in change within supply chain planning. So we help cascade knowledge. So we do sessions with the board, and we do sessions right down with the planners as well. We work, as you can see, in the food industry, but many other industries as well. And the idea really is to kind of help you with all the good ideas, all the good tools you put into place, making sure the people side, you know, the people are on board as well. They adapt the tools, adopt them, they use the data, because the data is there, but actually are we going to use it? And Dennis, you said earlier about, you know, also making the right decisions with all the massive data that's available. I'll leave you with one last thought. Plato said, games and play are a crucial part of our... Imagination. Who said, sorry? Team, no. Life, close. Okay, I'll accept life as well. Yeah, life and education and learning. Just remember that, you know, life is all about learning, so that's why I'll accept that one as well. You know, if you're trying to get your teams and people on board, make sure they have fun whilst they're learning as well. Otherwise, they're not going to learn. Thank you very much. Back to Dennis.